Hey everyone, and welcome to an impromptu Digital Foundry Direct, where we're taking a look at the latest system, software, firmware update for PlayStation 5. And the reason we're sort of breaking this out into a Direct is that these big updates from Sony don't happen very often. There's some interesting features in this one. And to discuss it with me, John Linneman.
It's a weird occasion. This is not something we normally do, but you know what? There is a lot of stuff in here, and this is the time period when the consoles really need to start making strides in terms of addressing any complaints that users may have leveled at them since getting them last November, if they got them, of course.
Exactly, yeah, and specifically we're talking about system software 21.01-03.00.38-00.00.00.01.
Oh, really? It just rolls
Yes.
right off the tongue, doesn't it?
And it shall be known from henceforth as the April update. Now, this is the big one. It's the one that actually allows PlayStation 5 owners to archive off PlayStation 5 games onto external storage, which has been, it's been a massive pain for us not being able to do that from day one. So how has this been a problem for you, John?
Well, I think that's one of the big key things here, especially for us more than even just the end user, is obviously we're testing a lot of games. We play a lot of games for both video and, just for personal fun. The problem is you only have like 667 gigabytes of storage on the SSD, the internal drive, and that fills up very quick with some of these games. So if you want to leave a few games on there that you might need it for a future video, it's kind of a problem because thus far we pretty much just have to delete them and re-download, which is kind of a pain. I mean, I don't have a super fast connection like some people do. It's 100 megabits down, so it's not the best. And yeah, just being able to offload these over to an SSD is a big deal. And I think you actually today, you tested this, so we'll have some numbers on that as well in terms of how long it takes.
Yeah, well, this has just been a massive problem for me too. And my somewhat nuclear solution was when funds and indeed availability allowed, I got a PlayStation 5 digital, which is, just an insane solution to what is a problem that should have been sorted at launch. But that effectively doubled my available storage for PlayStation 5.
Wait, I love it. So you bought a second PS5 just to double your storage.
Well, I've got, my bandwidth is even more constrained than yours. I've got like 30 megabit download.
Oh boy.
So, it was just totally insane, and thankfully it's all sorted now. But we're going to be talking about some of the features that are in this particular firmware. We'll talk about some of the ones that are in there, but we're not going to be covering. But it is all in the Sony PR, so check it out yourself. There's the cross-gen share feature. Allows PS4 users to view a PS5 game screen and even try PS5 games. There's the virtual, you can pass a controller virtually to a friend, and there's virtual co-op. So these are really nice features. I don't know whether you've ever used the game share features in the past, but this veers dangerously into streaming territory, which is a strict no-go for you.
That's right. I live in a no streaming household.
You shall remain pure then. And
exactly.
There's improvements to request to join, a whole bunch of enhanced control and personalization options. There's improvements to the PlayStation app, and apparently more to come there. But storage, it's the big one. And I'm happy to report that it kind of just works. I mean, exactly as it works with PlayStation 4 apps. Basically, you can now move PlayStation 5 apps away from the system drive onto external storage. Now, we've got a big video that I shot, but basically Tom did all of the work, and I'm not going to take any credit for it, where we're going to be discussing various solid-state storage external solutions and mechanical hard drives. But suffice to say, the testing I did today was with a SATA external SSD with a Sabrent USB bridge. And I don't think I'm spoiling too much from Tom's video, which is to say that is, just like Xbox, the best way to go if you're running external storage. So yeah, first of all, I started off by copying Marvel's Spider-Man, which is a PlayStation 5 app, of course, Spider-Man Remastered to an external drive. 54 gigs of data, give or take, 7 minutes 17 to do that, which isn't too bad. I mean, it's not super fast, but does the job. Curiously though, I tried to copy it back and it basically said that it was queuing the transfer.
Huh.
I went to access the queue and nothing was there. And I think what was actually happening there was that Spider-Man Remastered was actually patching the game, and that was kind of the hold up there. And then it transferred it over, and that was fine. Yeah, so just kind of curious, but that's what happened. I also backed up Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, Marvel's Avengers, and Dirt 5, 171 gigs of data. That took 23 minutes. So it's not a super high speed solution, but look, fundamentally it's doing exactly what it should do, which is that finally, I was using a 2 terabyte SSD here. Finally, we can actually archive off PlayStation 5 data. We don't need to delete it anymore. It's kind of weird that, a basic feature like this that should have been in at launch just provides so much relief now when it actually arrives in a system software update.
It is funny. We see this a lot, or we have seen this in the past with these modern day consoles where they have all these different features and UI elements to deal with, where when you first get it, you start to uncover annoyances, and then it's very relieving when they actually patch them in and sort of fix it up. So
we've talked about the features that have been sort of signposted, and we've talked about the stuff that's in the PR. But there is more. There's always seems to be these kind of extras within the firmware that Sony don't talk about.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got some interesting stuff here. First of all, a bug that's been bothering me for months now. These kind of ghost icons on the front page.
Oh my gosh, those things. So I actually figured out how to get rid of them, but it's a huge pain in the butt. Essentially, in the past, if you deleted a game, you'd have that ghost icon. You'd actually have to go back, start the reinstallation process, either with a disk or online, and then right as that begins, you go and delete it. I could not wrap my head around why it was that bad. It was just unbelievable that they would allow it to happen. So having this fixed saves a ton of time, weirdly enough, because, especially in the past where we were installing and then deleting games because of the storage issues. So it was kind of compounded by it. So this is kind of a double whammy in terms of addressing annoyances.
Yeah, mine just disappeared. I've never been too bothered by them, but it's just been like, I think this front end, what defines it is that it's so slick and feels really special. And to have these weird icons pop up, which just get in the way, kind of annoying.
The problem, though, is that they actually took up space. So if you had a bunch of those things, you'd end up having only 2 or 3 active games left on your bar there. So it was a real annoying issue, I have to say.
Definitely, yeah. And there seems to have been some changes made to the screen and video menu.
Ah, yes.
Which is really interesting. First of all, and I'm probably about time, there's always been the video data transfer rate option, which is automatic and -1 and -2. Now we know what that does. Basically, it affects chroma subsampling on the output. But to the average user, it's like, what's this about? What should I be doing? They've now got a little link there that fires up the web browser and tells you exactly what those features do, which is very, very useful. But I guess the big deal for many people is that there's now an option in the HDR menu that basically allows SDR content to run in SDR on an HDR screen, if you kind of see what I mean. So maybe you can explain what's going on there.
Yeah, so that is essentially with the PS5. When you fired it up with HDR enabled, it would display everything in HDR. And I think the idea was to prevent it from needing to switch back and forth all the time, depending on the content used. So it would just tone map SDR content into this HDR container. And you know what? It doesn't look bad on the right display. And in fact, I've taken advantage of it because it kind of boosted the brightness with the dynamic tone mapping feature of the LG screens. And the reason I wanted to do that is because you could combine it with black frame insertion at 60 Hertz to get a brighter image there. But that's a very unique side case. The problem, though, is that a lot of displays that maybe support HDR, they're either mediocre at it or even somewhat poor. And you would end up with sort of a dim, less accurate looking image. And accuracy in general would obviously take a hit by this tone mapping process, I would say. And so this essentially solves that. And now it works as it did on the PS4 Pro and PS4 for that matter, where it'll switch to HDR mode specifically when you engage HDR content. I guess the only question, and I don't know if you tested this, I haven't had a chance yet, is we've always found that when displaying in SDR, a lot of PS5 games are too dark.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that has been changed. We'll have to explore that.
We'll have to explore that. I haven't taken a look at it yet, but it's to the point where Remedy put out a patch for Control, and I'm not sure that it was actually their fault, the Black Crush on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, lots of talk about capture equipment possibly being at fault. We tested system level screenshots, which exhibited the same issue. So I don't know whether it's a system level issue. I kind of suspect it is, but it's definitely not capture. But I'm not sure whether it has been resolved on this.
The other thing I want to mention then, and this ties into both. So this is kind of what all these features lump into. It's all for helping people customize the output to more accurately fit their display of choice. For instance, the 4K video transfer rate. I saw a lot of people on Twitter that were kind of confused about why you would choose one or the other. Somebody was saying that if they chose anything other than -2, they were getting dropouts. And essentially all this chroma subsampling does for you effectively, you're basically raising or lowering the required bandwidth by changing the, you know, so if you're using like 420 chroma subsampling, then your red channel is essentially quarter res. So it's basically a way to reduce the amount of color information sent over the HDMI cable. So if you have an HDMI 2.1 display, you can obviously do 4K, 60, RGB, and HDR all at the same time, and higher in fact. But you can't do that on an HDMI 2.0 display. And this is kind of what that would control and allow you to sort of force that. And it's the same with another feature that I think we should talk about, is they finally added the option to enable or disable 120 hertz support.
Yes.
Which has multiple purposes. Obviously, the big one is that in cases like you remember with Devil May Cry, where you would, you know, by default, it only ran in a 120 hertz container, which was disastrous at first. Capcom patched this in, but if this option had been there from the beginning, it wouldn't have been a problem in the first place. You could simply toggle it. But then the other aspect to the 120 hertz support is that they have apparently changed something with the way that 120 hertz works for specific monitors, perhaps. Exactly,
yeah. They're talking about support for select 1080p monitors that have a 120 hertz output. Previously, I'm assuming you were locked to 60 hertz. Now it should run at 120. Now, this is something I couldn't test because I've got a 1440p 165 monitor. It does support 120 hertz, works fine at 1080p and 1440p with Xbox Series X, but again, it didn't do anything with PlayStation 5. So it's got HDMI 2.0 support, so I can actually get a picture, a 4K downscale picture on this 1440p monitor, but I can't access any high frame rate options. But, you know, give it a go if you've got a 1080p 120 monitor. One final thing, just to go back to the HDR on when supported setting. I've seen reports from Flat Panels HD that it's great for games but doesn't work particularly well with media apps. They're reporting that Apple TV and Netflix continue to run in forced HDR mode, and if you have this on when supported setting enabled, Disney Plus doesn't work at all, apparently.
Wow.
Great for games, not so good for app support. Other features, there are more features. HDMI device link has been added, which basically means that, well, if you enable One Touch Play, when you power on your PS5, it will power on your display and set it to the right HDMI input. Enable Power Off link puts the PS5 into rest mode when you turn off your TV. You've got to make sure, first of all, that this is all enabled on the display as well. But you didn't seem particularly enthused by that.
No. I've used this, I've had this enabled on other devices in the past, and the problem is that it kind of assumes that the only device you'll ever want to use on that TV is that specific device with that feature enabled.
Right.
And I was constantly having issues where, okay, I'll turn on the TV, it turns on the other device and then automatically switches the input. Or, okay, I'm done with this device, I turn it off, and I want it to switch devices, it then turns off the TV. Stuff like that, where I just found it frustrating. I always felt like I was fighting with it. Like, in theory, it's kind of interesting. It's just this typical HDMI CEC stuff. It's been available on a lot of devices for a long time, but I'm not a fan for that reason specifically.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that if you've got just like your TV and a PlayStation 5 attached to it, you might get some value out of it. But if you've got like a bunch of devices attached, it could get problematic. But it's nice to have the feature.
Sure.
And the final feature that has been added, which is a bit of a mystery, it's the System Features Update option in the system software. I don't know if you have any insight on this, but the first time I tried it, which was directly after I installed the firmware, it told me to reset my PlayStation 5 to fully update some PS5 features, which I did. And then I selected it again and it just said everything had been updated. So it does seem to do some sort of network check to begin with. So maybe there's some kind of dynamic features running in the background that need to be updated separately to the main firmware. But for now, at least, it's a bit of a mystery.
Wait, can you clarify? You said you had to reset your PS5. Do you mean just a restart?
It literally just said restart your PlayStation 5, not reset. But yeah, restart. Yeah.
Okay. Whew. That could have been bad.
But I think that's basically the fundamentals of what this update offers. So, you know, the big feature really is that finally, you know, you're not limited to 667 gigs for PS5 apps, which is, you know, it's kind of weird that such a basic feature should be considered a game changer, but it kind of is, which kind of leads us on to stuff that hasn't been addressed, which we kind of hope to be addressed. I actually had an interesting tweet from a user saying that the PlayStation 4 Pro Supersampling option isn't available on PlayStation 5, which means that users with a 1080p screen are somewhat limited when running Pro software on the PS5, which I'd never really considered this before. I mean, obviously we're all fully into the 4K ecosystem at the moment. But yeah, that is a curious feature that's missing, and apparently it even affects one PS5 game, Mortal Kombat 11.
I guess beyond that, though, the other thing I think that's still missing is, of course, VRR support. It's still been promised on there, and it's a game changer, guys. I mean, we've talked about it many times, but when this feature eventually hits, I think anybody with a supported TV will immediately see the huge benefits that this brings to the table.
I mean, for a 60 frames per second game that drops into the 50s or even like late 40s, you don't really notice it as much, if at all. I mean, it is a big game changer, especially for games like, well, as you said recently, Crysis Remastered on Series X. Quality mode, it just kind of seems flawless when you're using VRR, but not otherwise.
One confusion point around that is I've seen a number of people send us messages saying, hey, why don't you do benchmarking with VRR? Essentially implying that, you know, there would actually be some way to do that. And I guess we can't actually capture that specifically, but it's not something you capture so much. It's a display driven feature. The frame rate is going to be the same whether you're using VRR or not, right? Like the actual measurement is going to be the same. Frame times would look a little differently if you could measure them because it doesn't have these spikes, but the actual average frame rate would be exactly the same. It's really just what your eyes will see. It's a specific feature of the TVs that changes the way the frames are presented, and it completely gets rid of judder.
I mean, you could possibly do it by pointing a camera at the screen and using the VRR info that the LG has.
Yeah.
It doesn't really convey the experience. You get a fraction of it. You can see that it is smooth. Yeah, it's not really a scientific way to accurately measure what's going on there. So yeah, that's definitely a work in progress, and we'd need some kind of new capture technology, and you'd need a new YouTube app to make it work.
I mean, exactly. We couldn't show this either. That's the thing, is like YouTube doesn't support anything like this. So
you'd need a VRR screen to actually see the content, even if we could actually do it. But yeah, I mean, it is a big feature. We do want to see it on PlayStation 5. The last time I looked at the SDK roadmap, it was still TBC, which can mean anything, as is 8K native video output, which probably isn't really a priority at this time, but is on the box. But yeah, I mean, that's basically where we're at the moment. A big feature has been added. It works pretty well. It does what it says on the tin. There's still more features we'd like to see on the PlayStation 5 that would kind of bring it up to par with what we're seeing on Xbox. But I guess the big thing that we really need to see is that M2 expandable storage bay actually working. What you're seeing here is footage of what happens at the moment if you put a super fast NVMe drive into the PlayStation 5. Basically, it just tells you to take it out again and then shuts down, which isn't particularly helpful. But you know, good things come to those who wait, and fingers crossed that will be addressed soon. But I guess that's all I've got at the moment.
Yeah, same for me. It's just I'm still chuckling at the idea of making a video about a new firmware. But you know what? This stuff actually it saves us a lot of time. So you know what? It's great.
Okay, well, as usual, if you like the content, please like, subscribe, share, if you will. Ring the bell for instant notifications whenever we drop new content on the DF YouTube channel. And yes, the Digital Foundry Patreon, it's there for those who love what we do and want to support the team more directly, and you'll get access to pristine quality versions of everything we do, access to our Discord, and lots of other goodies coming soon. But that's all from John and I for now. Thanks for watching.